Welcome to the Daily Download. I'm Travis Fain, and today's deep dive conversation is about gambling addictions. North Carolina is on the cusp of legalizing online sports betting, allowing people to place a bet from their cell phones on just about any sport 24 hours a day. It's part of what the National Council on Problem Gambling calls the largest and fastest expansion of gambling in our nation's history. I'm joined by Brian Murphy, investigative sports reporter here at WRAL, who's been covering this bill and wrote a story focused on gambling addiction. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks, Travis.
So you focus in this story on one man, but his story, I think, would sound familiar to anybody who is either had a gambling addiction or known someone or had a family. Kind of walk us through that, and then we'll talk more about the macro world here.
Sure. I'm very grateful that Saul Malik, who is out of Texas and is in gambling recovery, was willing to share a story with me, and kind of starts like you would imagine a sports gambling story would start, right? He was into fantasy baseball. He kind of liked the thrill of a scratch-off ticket or going to casino night at a school. And when he got to college, somebody introduced him to a bookie, and he placed his first bet and won and thought, oh, man, this is awesome. Won his next bet. This is awesome. And then just found himself in a place where gambling kind of started to rule his life. He was placing bets late at night, waking up early in the morning, checking them out to see if they won, and placing another bet. Started betting on, he mentions in the story, Croatian volleyball matches.
So that was a real example, Croatian volleyball that he was betting on.
That's what he said. He said one of his last big scores, one of the last times he made a lot of money, he was betting on a U20 game between like Sweden and some other country in basketball. And people may not be familiar with this, but these apps, and he wasn't on apps. He was dealing with bookies and stuff. But the apps will allow you to bet in the game. So as Sweden's lead kept expanding, he was able to place more and more bets that Sweden would win by more and more points, and said that was one of his last big times that he really won big. And
that was one of the things that struck me about the story is he said, it became not enough to bet on a game because I couldn't wait to find out if I'd won. I needed the immediacy of it. So he's betting, and these apps allow you to bet, on what the score at the end of a quarter, or how incremental is it?
You can bet first 5 innings of a baseball game. If 9 innings is too long, you can bet the first 5 innings of a baseball game. I mean, they're micro betting. Some of these sites allow you to bet on the next play or who's going to win the next tennis point. So there really is an instant gratification that can come with this, much like a scratch-off ticket. If you can't wait for that night's lotto drawing or the lotto drawing in a couple of days, you can get an immediate gratification of knowing if you won or lost.
And this guy was betting, I think the story said, 150 times a week.
Yeah. And you can't do, I mean, it's almost impossible to do that just betting games. You have to be betting quarters and halves and scoring totals and, how many three-pointers will Steph Curry have tonight?
So as this bill moves forward, and we do kind of expect it to become law, although it has not yet, to legalize sports gambling coming in January in North Carolina, are there protections built in to kind of stop or at least discourage this sort of behavior?
Yeah, I think this is important. The proponents of this bill, those in favor of it, will say, look, if you're on one of these sites, you get through a mobile operator, a FanDuel, a DraftKings, there's dozens of them. You can set limits. You can set limits on how much you deposit. You can set limits on how often you bet. You can even say, take me off, stop. Click a button, and they will not let you bet for a week or a month or a year. They are, at least according to the legislation and the supporters, they are people who have to have a documented history of recognizing and trying to solve problem gambling. So if they see that Travis, you're a casual bettor, you bet twice a week and for small limits, $20 max, and then all of a sudden you start betting 15 times a day at hundreds of dollars a pop, they should be able to recognize that and reach out to you in some way, via text, via email, via phone call even, and say, is this you? First of all, is this you? Is someone gotten control of your account? And secondly, is everything okay?
Are you sure you want to keep giving us money?
Right. And now how that works in practice, I don't know, but some of those tools are there certainly for them to be able to intervene.
All right, we're going to talk more about this. We'll get an update on the legislative progress here, but we're going to take a quick break. Stick with us. Welcome back to the Daily Download. We're with Brian Murphy, who covers sports and the intersection of sports and politics in North Carolina, which means he's been writing about sports gambling, which there is a legislative effort to legalize in North Carolina. Did a story about gambling addiction. And Brian, this was something from your main source on this that it made me stop as I was reading the story. And he said that when he saw his first bet was winning, and it was like $10, that, quote, I felt probably better about myself than I'd ever felt before.
Yeah, and this is what some of the critics of sports gambling say, that it is as addictive as opioids. That's according to the manual that diagnoses these types of disorders or addictions. That rush you get is not dissimilar to the rush you get from other vices. And there's a real concern that your phone is already addictive.
Right.
And then you're as you've written about and as you've interviewed people about, and now you're layering on a very addictive, compulsive thing that you have 24-hour access to. And we've seen in Ohio where they legalized sports gambling in January, 150% uptick in calls to the problem gambling helpline. The National Council on Problem Gambling estimates that we've seen a 30% increase in gambling addiction since 2018, which is when the Supreme Court sort of let states do what they want when it comes to sports gambling. So I don't think there's any doubt that we're seeing an uptick in gambling addiction and problem gambling. Now, the bill does allocate $2 million for North Carolina to treat gambling addiction and do some gambling education. Is that enough? I think we're gonna have to find out some of these things in real time.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about the bill itself and how it works, and particularly the tax structure. I think it's a 14% tax that goes to the state so that the state will make money.
Yeah, the way the bill is currently structured, it's a 14% privilege tax, and that's on adjusted gross revenue. So we'll get a couple gambling terms here. The handle is what everybody bets. So me and you bet $100 a piece. The handle is $200, and then they got to pay out one of us. So one of us wins $100. So now they have $100 in gross revenue, right? The book has kept $100. They get to write off things like promotional bets and free bets, and then whatever money is left, their adjusted gross revenue, they get taxed 14% on.
And those write-offs, those are big. So if FanDuel or one of these apps says, if you bet $5, we'll put $100 into your account, they can then use that as a tax break, that $100 promotion, and it significantly lowers what they're paying to the state, right?
Right. And Jason Sain, who's the primary sponsor of this bill, compared it to a coupon. If you get a coupon from Burger King and you go and buy a burger, they don't they don't charge that as revenue to the company. So that's how he attributed it. But what we've seen in other states is these promotions and free bet deductions dramatically lower the amount of taxable revenue that these companies have. Now, North Carolina has phased that out. It's only a couple of years. The first year it's unlimited. Then there are phase outs, and by 2027, companies will no longer be able to write off those promos and deduct and free bets as deductions. But we will see a dramatic lowering of the tax revenue that comes into the state that first year. Proponents of the bill say that's customer acquisition, right? We got to get people off these illegal sites or off their bookie and get them onto the legal market. Critics will say, no, we're just increasing gambling. We're giving money away to lure customers in. And some, I think Marcia Morey compared it to sort of a drug dealer who will give your first hit for free and make sure you keep coming back.
And gets a tax write-off for doing it.
Right, and is able to lower their threshold. I think we're going to see a lot of promo and free bets because there's no restrictions, right? So rather than take that dollar and be taxed 14% on it, I can take that dollar and invest it in new customer acquisition and lower my tax bill.
What's the timetable on this bill? It is passed, I believe, the House, which was where it failed the last time they tried this, was either last year or the year before. So now it's pending in the Senate, which has passed something very similar before, but we had an election in between. So there are different senators. I mean, when does it move forward, and will it move forward?
Yeah, it's in the Senate right now. It'll have to go through the committee process and then get on the Senate floor. I don't think there's much doubt that they have the votes to pass it in the Senate. As you mentioned in the last session, it passed the Senate. I don't think anything's happened that's made the Senate less friendly to gambling interests than it was then. Very divided. Republicans divided, Democrats divided, as we saw in the House vote, and I think we'll see again in the Senate.
But it's not Democrats supported and Republicans. It's got bipartisan support and bipartisan opposition, and really passionate opposition.
Yeah, I guess that's what I meant by divided. There are Republicans who are very much in favor of this and Republicans who are very much against it, and same for the Democrats. If it all passes, and Governor Cooper has indicated he will sign this bill, people would be able to place those bets by January. January 8th is the effective date for this bill. I believe that's the day of the College Football National Championship.
I was going to say, what's happening on January 8th? Because that's a real specific date.
Well, originally they had January 1st, and I guess the Lottery Commission, which is going to be in charge of this and is going to have to, they're going to be able to take out a $14 million loan from the North Carolina Lottery. The commission is to get the regulatory apparatus up for this. So if that gives you some sense of how much regulation is going to happen, that loan will be repaid over 3 years. So nobody's really losing any money. But the lottery apparently asked that it not start on January 1st, which was the original date.
Obviously, it's a holiday. They don't want it to start on a holiday.
Yeah, obviously that's a holiday. So they've built in 1 week buffer, and March Madness, by next March, surely you'll be able to bet.
All right. Brian Murphy, WRAL sports investigative reporter. Thanks for your time today. Y'all can read Brian's story online, WRAL.com. He's also written a ton about this bill and about sports gambling in general, so you can check that out. If you like what you heard here, please rate us, review us on Apple Podcast or whatever podcast app you use. We appreciate you listening to the WRAL Daily Download, making us part of that morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news in the morning is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email waiting for you in your inbox every morning. Triangle news, events, headlines, helps get you ready for your day. You can sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter. Thanks for listening.